The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist. With your host, Dave Hondell.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Stage Door Show. Tonight, this is Dave Hondell. Tonight, I'm honored to have our guest on the show. She's an Emmy-nominated TV host who you've seen on Trading Spaces and Home Made Simple, as well as a guest on the world's biggest TV talk and game shows. She's also an accomplished actress who's graced many Broadway stages. She's also a New York Times bestselling author. So please welcome one of my favorites, Paige Davis. Thanks for being on the show, Paige.
Really happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I want to start with this because, obviously you've been acting for a long time and, even when you're younger, and obviously anybody who's been in a theater knows how chaotic it can be backstage, right? And, and being
the
on these,
part.
yeah, right. Exactly. But being on, Trading Spaces and some of these, the shows like that, I would imagine that there's a lot of controlled chaos that went on behind the scenes, to say the least, right?
Controlled chaos? I'm sorry.
Maybe not controlled. But, having that background in theater, did that kind of help prepare you for your hosting job?
Yeah, 100% it did. In fact, when I found out that they were auditioning for a host for this show and, knowing that it was an unscripted show, right? Trading Spaces was really kind of one of the very first reality shows that wasn't quite literally a how-to show, right? We weren't Bob Vila, we weren't
Right.
Martha Stewart. We put the tools in the homeowner's hands and whatever. So you didn't know it was going to happen. It wasn't planned in advance and there was nothing scripted about it. And it really actually was reality television. The producers tell people what to say, and they really did the work in the amount of time they said. So knowing that it was going to be real, I was trying to get an audition for the show because a friend of mine had told me about it. And I said, look, I really think that my training in improv and my background in theater is actually ideally suited to what I understand as an unscripted show, because no one's telling you what to say and you've got to be able to react in the moment, right? Whatever happens, you've got to know how to go with it, what to do. Of course, the difference in theater is that in almost every instance, you do have a script, but you still have to be able to, roll with the punches if someone misses an entrance or if a costume goes awry or a set piece is wrong, or you really have to be able to be present and connected with who you're working with in order to be real and not just throw up your hands like, oh, cut.
Right.
You can't cut in the theater. There's no cut.
Right. There's no cut. The show must go on. Absolutely.
That's right.
And there's a lot of human moments on the show, and a lot of there's real people, and a lot of human moments and emotional moments at times. And I'm guessing. I mean, you had an impact on a lot of people doing that show for so many years, and what kind of memories do you take away from that? Because I would imagine that these people, again, it's a real thing, and I'm sure they had a lot of emotions, kind of taken away from it.
The homeowners really did have many, many emotions. Most of the time, though, I have to say it was happy. Audiences and fans of Trading Spaces recall very readily and in the forefront of our brains the quote unquote, they hated it rooms. But one of the reasons why we recall them so readily and so easily is because they were actually quite few. I wasn't even the host of the first season. They did 2 seasons without a host before I was brought back. Thank you, vindication.
Which is exactly.
But even in the first initial, run that I did, I did over 500 episodes. That's like 1,000 rooms.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And I really don't need my fingers and toes to count how many times it, quote unquote, went bad and they hated it. Most of the time. Now, every room wasn't perfect and every room wasn't like tears of joy.
Right.
But it was, what I remember most is that it was a tremendous amount of hard work. like I mentioned just, a moment ago, the homeowners really did do the work. The designers really did do the work.
Right.
We really did do it in 2 days' time, overnight, only used $1,000. And, the show consisted of a day one and a day two. There was also a day zero where we set up the lights, we did the
Yeah.
interviews, all that stuff. But the work was 2 days, and every day one, virtually every day one was an overnighter, just
Yeah.
up all night. And I just remember like feeling really bonded with everyone. Remember everyone being really happy. I remember being really, really, really tired. And the thing that I probably remember the most of all of it was how tight we all were as a group, the
Yeah.
crew, the cast. And it didn't mean we didn't have disagreements. We did. We
Yeah.
absolutely had disagreements. We had, miniature falling outs and things like that. When people say like with a show, oh, we're like a family, and usually they mean it in a bit of a saccharine way.
Right.
I mean it with all its,
Yeah. Every
dysfunction
aspect.
and
Yeah.
everything else. Like we fought really hard, but we loved really hard.
Mhm.
And uh, the thing I take away the most is how fiercely we uh, we protected the show and how much we really loved it and how much we adored our crew.
Yeah.
Ride or die. These are people who I worked with 20 years ago. And if I see them, it's like I saw them yesterday.
Right. Yeah.
They are some of my dearest friends that I maybe only talk to like every 3 or years.
Yeah.
But there's just a bond there that's so strong. And that's what I take away the most.
Yeah. What a gratifying thing. And that's awesome. And also the theater is the same way, because my daughter and my son have both been in theater, and just the camaraderie, just and the safe space, I think in theater is just amazing. It's unlike any other, I think, industry.
Oh yeah, the
Right.
camaraderie and safe space is amazing. But I think too, if you go through a, a defining show, if you're part of, say, a Hamilton,
Right.
if you're part of a Book of Mormon, if you're part of, um, well, Hadestown for
Right.
sure, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, right?
Yeah.
These are people who are like, we went through something together.
Yep.
And as an original company, as an original cast, no one will quite understand it the way we do.
Right.
And it can just unite you in a way that you have something so fundamental in common to like who you are and how you've grown as an artist that it just connects you.
Yeah, for sure. That's well said. Paige, what interested you in performing in the first place? I mean, at what age did you become, to the point that you knew you were going to do this for a living?
I didn't realize that I wanted to do musical theater for a living right away. I thought I wanted to be a gymnast,
Oh,
and I
okay.
competed at the state level as a gymnast.
Wow.
And I loved gymnastics very much, and I was relatively good at it. I had, Olympics in my eyes and everything else. I
Wow.
was never good enough to do that ever. But I did love it. But when I became 13, well, or 12, I guess, two things happened at the same time, rather coincidentally. I realized that when I was at the gym training for gymnastics, what I was really thoroughly enjoying was all the in-between moves, like not the tricks, but like the connecting stuff,
Right.
the dance moves.
Yeah.
And I also was I got injured, and at the same time, I kind of discovered my mom's West Side Story album. And it just all sort of happened right around the same time. And I just made this shift happened in my brain where I was like, wait a minute, you want to dance. That's what you want to do. And got really excited about it. And I really wanted to start taking dance lessons, which, gymnastics is an extremely expensive sport. So the
Yeah.
idea that I was like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I think I want to dance. And my parents were like, squeeze me. And my Aunt Eileen, who had really funded a lot of that, she also was like, whoa, what? Um, but then a librarian at my middle school told me that there was a high school of performing arts in Louisville, which at the time there were only 12 in the country, and Louisville, Kentucky had one, and that's where I lived.
Yeah.
She said, you have to audition to get in, but it's a public school, it's free.
Yeah.
So I started taking dance lessons seriously at 13 years old at the
Wow.
High School of Performing Arts in Louisville, Kentucky. YPAS, YPAS, Youth Performing Arts School.
Okay.
Why pass? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you didn't
And
pass on it.
yeah, so and then my parents surprised me and took me to New York to see Debbie Allen, who I idolized because, fame.
Yep. Absolutely.
And my mother's really good friend, her brother was married to Debbie Allen at the time. What? Six
Wow.
Degrees of Debbie Allen. And so I had this kind of possibility that I was maybe going to get to meet her. So
Yeah.
she took me to see her in Sweet Charity on Broadway. And she was fantastic and she was wonderful, but I didn't get to meet her. But in that production was BB Newirth, and she was playing Nikki. And I was like, no offense to Debbie Allen, I still think she's the goddess of all goddesses ever on
Yeah.
planet Earth. But as a 13-year-old girl, I was like, oh my gosh, Debbie Schmebby, who is that?
Yeah.
And I like vowed right then and there, like, I'm gonna do what they do. I'm gonna do what she does. I don't
Yeah.
care how I'm gonna do it. I don't know what's gonna make it happen, but I'm not gonna stop until I do.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah, and the rest is history. Just wanted to also kind of cover this because I've seen a lot of, I saw you on The Tonight Show, I saw you on Ellen and Oprah, and what a whirlwind during that time. I mean, so talk about being on those shows. I mean, because you're still a big star, and to be on those shows, what was it like walking out on The Tonight Show? And I mean, it must just be amazing, just that feeling to walk out on that stage and on those big shows like
Well,
that.
I don't know if I'm still a big star, but even as a Jew, you're still on the Christmas card list. Just for even saying that. No, it was incredible. But, honestly, and I'll answer your question for sure, but what was even more truly remarkable for me was being able to work with BB in the musical Chicago later on. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
made my Broadway debut in Chicago, and she was Velma at the time.
Wow.
And like to be able to work with her and be
Yep.
able to tell her what she meant to me. And I put a note under her dressing room door, and she came to me and told me how much it meant to her. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
what? You touched the paper I wrote on? And, it's just like
That's amazing.
incredible. That musical has really shaped me. I've been able to go in and out of that musical, whether on Broadway or national tour or international tour, since 1998.
Yeah.
And, that's all been just the most remarkable gift and such a full circle moment for me. All the other stuff was incredibly exciting, really exciting, but it was, it was definitely a shared win, right? I mean, my success as a host on Trading Spaces rested entirely on the shoulders of everyone else.
Yeah.
I hosted the program. There would be no show if the designers did not show up
Right.
complete with planned rooms. The
Yeah.
amount of work they had to do before every episode was, pretty substantial.
Yeah.
And they all had, careers and lives and businesses and families and everything else. And so for them to balance all of that and, whether the show happened or not, essentially rested on their shoulders.
Right.
Of course, the producers and then our crew, which we were a skeleton crew. Nowadays you go to a reality show, either on set or in the field, which we were, quote unquote, in the field, right? At
Yep.
people's homes, literally in the neighborhoods. Like I remember we had like a crew of like 12,
Yeah.
and now it's like 36,
At least, yeah.
40 people. And I'm like,
Right.
we don't need you all here. Like, God bless you. You've all got
Right.
jobs. I'm not going to say anything out loud to anybody, but like,
Right.
really? You could go home. And so, yeah, I mean, I always felt a little kind of embarrassed by the sort of notoriety.
The
And
attention of it. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to be all altruistic and say I didn't love it. I did love it, but
Right.
I
Right.
tried very hard to make sure that my crew knew how much I appreciated them, and I
Right.
tried to always shout out the designers whenever possible.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Do you have any regrets in your career? Anything that you wish you would have done?
Yeah, I do. And I don't believe in regret. It's kind of silly. I don't believe in it, but I do it all the time. Like, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
I yeah, I would definitely regret some timing things, especially like when I was doing trading spaces. The designers, they did have to do so much of the preliminary work, but I was the only one who was out in the field for every episode. Everyone else leapfrogged or changed cities. Like, we'd do 3 episodes in a city and then move on. So the crew would leapfrog, the
Oh, okay.
producers would leapfrog.
Yeah.
My makeup artist was with me all the time.
Oh,
God
okay.
bless Randall Tang. He
Yeah.
he was always out there, and he was absolutely my right hand person,
Sure.
out there. But because of that, I didn't have really any free time, and I had signed, right, this contract,
Right.
and I had a casting director at NBC say, "Look, there's this guy. He's a manager. His name's Mark. I won't say his last name. And he really wants to represent you." And I'm like, "A manager?" Like, I always thought managers, like, agents have a bad enough reputation. I thought managers were like white patent leather shoes and gold chains and like Donald Trump hair.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I don't have a career to manage. I'm like 365 doing trading spaces for the next 3 years. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing to manage. Maybe like in another year or two, I'll meet with him, but that was a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Really big mistake, because by the time I had an opportunity to meet with him, trading spaces had kind of cooled a little bit. So did
Sure.
my skillet, so to speak. And, you got to jump on those opportunities. I had my very first mentor in television. Her name was Denise Cramsey. And she was kind of instrumental in getting kind of one of my first big agents.
Yeah.
As opposed to a boutique agency. Gage
Right.
Group, awesome. Shout out to Gage Group. They're incredible. But I had been being encouraged to try to go to a larger agency to have more opportunities. And I was like really resisting. And she said, "Look, they just want to meet with you." And she said, "I'm going to tell you something straight up, Paige. Number one rule, never turn down a meeting.
Yeah.
You can always say no, or I pass, or thank you so much, or it's not the right time for me. Never turn down a meeting. Be respectful, be honest, but be open."
Right.
And I never met with him, right? I turned down the meeting, and I turned
Yeah.
it down 4 times.
Wow.
So that's a regret,
Yeah.
sure. Things
Um,
like that.
yeah, and that's great advice for our listeners as well. I mean, like I said, these are young artists themselves and just coming up, and any kind of tidbit like that we can give them. That's awesome. And what about your favorite moment in your career? What's in regardless if it's acting or if it's on your TV hosting, what was your favorite moment?
Um, Probably, I've often said that my favorite job of all time was doing Boeing on Broadway. Do you know that
Yeah,
play?
yeah, on Broadway. Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
knew you're in that. Absolutely.
So I was in the revival of that, and with Mark Rylance and Christine Baranski, I replaced Catherine Hahn,
Wow.
who's a magnificent actress. I
Right.
played Gloria, the American flight attendant, and I had never been in a farce before.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really done I'm trying to think if I'd done a straight play. I'm sure that I had, but nothing of, so-called note.
Sure.
Um, and to be in a straight play, to not have to dance, to not have to sing. I had to be quite physical. It was a lot of physical comedy, which
Right.
I adored. And I grew so much as an actor, numerous meltdowns, panic attacks, everything else under the sun. But to study with Mark Rylance, to see him every day at work, and Christine Baranski and Missy Pyle, who had also taken over for the German flight attendant at the time, and Greg Gurman. He's kind of, I think a lot of people really know him from way back in the Ally McBeal days.
Right.
But he's done an amazing turn on Grey's Anatomy, and now I'm probably going to want to barf later because he also has done like incredible things, and I'm totally blanking on his bio right now, but I'm like one of his number one fans, which
Yeah.
seems implausible at the moment since I can't remember anything he's done. But I think he's fantastic. But to be able to do that comedy every night and to live on the edge with that kind of closed door, open door, if something happens wrong, the play's over.
Yeah.
To live on the edge like that was so exciting. And to hear that massive laughter, the roars of laughter coming from the
Yeah.
audience was just amazing. And then, of course, Chicago would be my
Right.
next.
Yeah, I was going to say, walking out on a Broadway stage for the first time, that just must have been exhilarating. And to get that immediate reaction from the crowd,
Yeah.
but 8 shows a week, that's exhausting, I would imagine, right?
My Broadway debut was also an incredible full circle moment. I had seen a chorus line when in its original production at the Schubert Theater.
Yep.
And I remember I was just a little girl, and I remember watching the dancers come out of the stage door. I wanted to watch them come out of the stage door.
Yeah.
And the Schubert Theater stage door, as well as the booth, which is
Yep.
all right there in Schubert Alley in New
Yep.
York City, they are plated in brass.
Yep.
But to a little girl, that looked gold. I swore that was a literal
Gold door.
stage door.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
believed it. And like well into my 20s, I thought it was a gold stage door because something had gone into my brain,
Yeah.
And I would go through Schubert Alley every time I was in New York. If you're in the Broadway district, you inevitably cut through there.
Sure.
And I would see that door and I would think, oh my gosh, one day I'm going to walk through that gold stage door.
Yep.
And my Broadway debut was in Chicago when it was still at the Schubert before it had moved to the Ambassador.
That's amazing.
And so I walked through the exact gold stage door that I had dreamed about. Not a figurative
Right.
Broadway stage door, but the actual stage door I had stared at for years and years.
Always been to hundreds of shows and absolutely love going to New York and seeing shows. But what do you want your legacy to be, Paige? What do you want people to think of when they think of Paige Davis when it's all said and done?
It's so funny because I've actually been in a serious contemplation about this over the last few weeks, couple of weeks or so, especially. I really want to be known for my kindness. I know that sounds so like gross, but I really do mean that. And I think what's important for me is that I understand how to set boundaries around that, and I understand how to really be kind from a true place in my heart, and not because I'm afraid of looking bad or I'm afraid of hurting someone's feelings, or I really, really, really want to be of service. I want to be there for people. I just do. I really, really am starting to get into elder care. I'd really like to help elderly people. And there have just been all these bizarre kind of signs where like literally elderly people are popping into my life, literally falling at my feet. Like a woman fell at my feet.
Wow. Literally
And-
fell at your feet. Wow.
Yeah. And I've been kind of taking care of her as really just as a companion more than anything. I
Sure.
mean, obviously, I'm not a doctor. Uh, and she's like my new bubby.
Wow. That's
Amazing.
amazing. It really
So,
is.
yeah, I'm just trying to sort of figure my way, like, how can I still do things I want to do and achieve things I want to achieve, um, but be there for people so that I feel fulfilled in that way.
That's great. I love that. So Paige, what do you have coming up? What kind of projects are you working on?
Oh my goodness. Well, I just shot a little sizzle reel. I'm pitching a new home show, so everybody can keep their fingers crossed for me for that. I'm very excited about it. Finally getting to work with my dear friend Matthew Hoffman. Hopefully, I've got my
Nice.
fingers and my toes crossed. And I shot an independent film last year. It's called Beyond the Fog,
Oh,
and it's directed by this up and coming woman. Her name is Desiree Abeta, and she's really terrific. She wrote it, and she's really into magical realism, and it's very much about not letting outside expected forces influence who you're going to be and influence what your confidence is. It's definitely a coming of age story for women. It subtly, or maybe not so subtly, attacks the patriarchy, but it's definitely it's not like a man bashing film or anything like that. It's about girls coming of age and really believing in their own confidence and what they can achieve and how they can be strong for themselves. And it hopefully extrapolates to everyone that they can do the same thing. Have you ever heard that saying, don't put the hand over your head?
I have not, but
So
it sounds like a
if
great saying.
creativity, like if creativity comes through, right, from a source, as
Sure.
you could call it God if you want to, or nature, but that which is, unknown. A lot of people, when they're creative, they're like, oh my God, I don't even know how I thought of that, right?
Right.
And so if that's coming into you from above, imagine if you had a hand over your head, you're
Don't block it.
blocking that energy,
Right.
right? So it's a figurative way of saying, don't block that. And that's what I really hope that this film will mean for people. It's being submitted to festivals now, and so hopefully you guys will all get to see it soon.
Well, again, when it's submitted, let us know about it. We'll put it on our social media, and definitely everybody listening, go check that out when it comes out, and we'll make sure that everybody knows about it. So I also want to just let people know how to find you on the internet. I think PaigeDavis.com. I've been on your website. It's a really great website. So
It is a really good website.
I
I don't
love
think
it.
it's been updated in like an eternity.
I really like it though. All the videos and all that, and all the photos from Trading Spaces. Anybody
Yeah.
listening, just make sure you go to PaigeDavis.com. And how can they find you on social media?
I'm the same across Instagram and Facebook. I don't. Does anybody use Twitter anymore?
I don't.
Well, I don't
I have
use
hardly
it,
any followers
FYI,
on
but
X. Instagram is my
oh
biggest
yeah, X,
one.
right? That shows you how far behind I am.
There you go.
But it's real Paige Davis.
Okay. And I like how you interact with people as well, and on social media. You have great content on there, and I'm on your Instagram as well. So anyway, just a pleasure having you on. It's really an honor to have you on the show, and thank you for taking the time to do this tonight, Paige.
Oh yeah, it means a lot to me. I'm really thrilled to do it. Thanks.